Some lady from the HOA tried to fine me $500 because my brother-in-law took a nap on our couch. Not even kidding, just laid down for a nap. That was the beginning of the weirdest, most infuriating war I've ever been dragged into. Let me back up for a sec. I'm not some guy who goes looking for trouble. I'm not that neighbor who throws wild parties or leaves Christmas lights up till June. I mow my lawn, pay my taxes, drive the speed limit. I mind my business. I teach engineering at the community college over in Springdale, mostly first years. Good kids, some of them just trying to figure out how to not electrocute themselves on basic circuits. I've been doing it long enough that I've got a rhythm. Same lunch spot, same lectures, same corny jokes. That kind of life. My wife Marie, she's the real backbone of the operation. Works nights as an ER nurse. She's the calm in every storm. I once hit a deer at 70, walked away with the bumper dragging like a busted lip, and she didn't even blink. Just said, "Glad you're okay. Now go call insurance." That's Marie. Practical, steady. We've got one kid, Owen, 17. Good head on his shoulders. Quiet, sharp. Got a whole setup in the garage where he's building some robot thing for school that I still don't totally understand. Not the kind of kid that needs a lot of micromanaging. He's more adult than half the adults I know. Our house. Man, that house means something to me. It's not fancy. Just a one-story rancher with blue siding that fades a little more every summer. But I rebuilt half that place with my own hands. After the hurricane tore through 6 years back, I didn't just patch things up, I gutted it. Ripped out the floors, rebuilt the porch, replaced every damn window myself. I was out there with my brother Mike for weeks, sweating our asses off, drinking warm beer and swearing at warped boards. Mike passed a couple years after that. Heart. Hit me harder than I thought it would. So now, when I sit on that porch with a beer and the dog curled up by my feet, I still hear his laugh. That house is part of him now. Part of all of us. We moved into this neighborhood thinking we'd stay forever. Quiet cul-de-sac, tree-lined streets. People wave when you drive by, most of them anyway. We knew there was an HOA. They had a little welcome packet with a glossy cover and a list of community standards that sounded harmless enough. No rusted cars on blocks, no purple houses, keep the trash bins out of sight. Reasonable stuff. I figured fine, keeps the place looking decent. Didn't pay much attention to the board or their meetings. I mean, who does? You get the newsletter? Maybe skim the headlines. Pool maintenance schedule. Spring picnic. Reminder, no fireworks. Nothing life-changing. That was before the fire. Marie's brother, Derek, and his wife, Linda, lived up north, out in Wisconsin. Retired a couple years ago. Spent most of their time taking road trips, spoiling their grandkids, just living the good kind of slow. They were solid people. Polite, mellow, the kind who bring their own towels when they visit so they don't add to your laundry. Then their house burned down. Electrical issue in the attic, insurance still in some hellish limbo. They lost just about everything except their car and the clothes they were wearing. It was midwinter too, snow up to the windows. They needed somewhere to land, so they came to us. It wasn't even a discussion. Marie just looked at me and I said, of course they can stay. Family's family. We set up the guest room for them, made space in the hall closet, cleared out a shelf in the fridge. They didn't ask for a thing. Said they just needed a place to breathe and figure things out. And honestly, it was kinda nice. They weren't loud or messy. Linda liked doing crossword puzzles on the porch in the morning with Marie. Derek helped me tune up the mower. He even fixed a leak under the kitchen sink that I'd been ignoring for a year and a half. They insisted on buying groceries, cooking dinner a few nights a week. It felt like community, real family stuff. Nobody complained. Nobody said a word. Not at first. They were with us maybe 3 weeks before I got the first letter, folded real neat in a white envelope with that HOA logo at the top, a little tree in front of a house like it's trying too hard to be friendly. Inside, in that passive-aggressive font they always use, it said something about unregistered long-term guests exceeding community guidelines. Now, I read that twice, thinking it had to be some boilerplate nonsense. I thought maybe they sent it to everyone, like a seasonal reminder or something. But then I noticed it was addressed directly to me, by name. Still, I wasn't worried. I figured I'd call, explain the situation, and that'd be that. These people weren't strangers or tenants. They weren't paying rent, signing leases, none of that. Just family staying with us temporarily because their house literally turned to ash. I had no idea that phone call would be the start of something that would take over my life. But I'll get to that. Let me just say this. If you've never dealt with a power-hungry HOA, count your blessings. You'd think I set the house on fire myself the way they came after me. Like Derek sleeping in our guest room was a threat to the fabric of the whole damn neighborhood. I didn't know it yet, but they'd already decided we were a problem. And when the HOA decides you're a problem, they don't knock. They dig. And they keep digging until they find something or make something up. So a couple days after that letter showed up, I did what any reasonable adult would do. I called the HOA number listed at the bottom, figured I'd talk to someone, clear up the misunderstanding, and that'd be the end of it. Wrong. The call went to voicemail, straight to it. One of those pre-recorded things. You've reached the board of the Fairhaven Preserve Homeowners Association. Our hours are Monday through Friday, 11 to 2. If you're calling about a violation, please reference your case ID number. Case ID number? I left a message anyway, trying to sound polite. Hey, this is Jack Ellison on Brookview Drive. Got a letter about some long-term guests. My wife's brother and his wife are staying with us after a house fire. Just wanted to clear things up. I left my number and asked for a callback. Didn't hear a damn thing for days. Then a second letter showed up. This one wasn't as polite. Same white envelope, same friendly little tree logo, but the tone was sharper. It said we were now in violation of Article 4, Section 2B of the HOA bylaws, something about unauthorized occupancy of non-owners beyond the 14-day guest threshold without board approval. Then the kicker, failure to remedy this issue may result in fines and legal action per Section 7. I swear to God, it felt like I was reading an eviction notice from a neighborhood I own a house in. I showed it to Marie. She was just coming off a night shift and looked like she'd been hit by a freight train. She read the letter, rubbed her eyes, and said, "Are they serious?" I said, "Apparently." Marie took a breath, folded the letter, and said, "They're just trying to scare us. Don't let it get to you." But it did get to me, because now I had to sit at the dinner table with Derek and Linda and pretend everything was fine while this little warning buzzer was going off in the back of my head. They'd already been through hell. Their whole house, their memories, their photo albums, all gone. And now I'm supposed to say, hey, just a heads up, the HOA is threatening legal action because you've been here longer than 2 weeks. I didn't say anything to them yet. I didn't want them to feel like a burden. Derek was already walking around like he was afraid to touch anything. Linda had started folding our laundry like it was rent. The next morning, I saw her in the kitchen with a manila folder full of hotel brochures. I asked, "What's that?" She gave this little tight-lipped smile and said, "Just looking at options. We don't want to cause trouble." That pissed me off more than the damn letter did. I told her no way in hell were they leaving just because some clipboard warrior had too much time on her hands. She said she appreciated that, but I could tell. It was already getting in their heads. So I decided to take it up a notch. No more voicemails. I went down to the clubhouse. That's where the HOA office is, or at least the mailbox where they pretend to be reachable. Tiny room next to the pool with a bulletin board full of outdated flyers. Yoga Thursdays, neighborhood watch meeting, missing cat, Ginger, answers to Muffin. I knocked, nobody answered, but the door creaked open, and that's when I met her. Cynthia Reed. She was sitting behind the desk like she'd been expecting me. Blonde bob, big glasses, pressed button-down shirt, expression like someone just told her the salad bar was out of kale. You know the type. I introduced myself, explained who I was, and said I was there about the violation notice. She didn't offer a handshake, didn't smile, just kind of squinted at me like I was a mosquito buzzing too close to her face. Then she said, "You're the one with the guests." I said, "Relatives, my brother-in-law and his wife. They're staying with us while they deal with a..." She cut me off. "I'm aware. That's not the issue. The issue is duration. Guests are allowed for up to 14 days without board approval. It's in the bylaws." I said, "They're not renters. They're not paying anything. They're family." She opened a binder. I kid you not, a thick 3-ring binder like we were in some kind of courtroom drama, flipped a few pages, then tapped a paragraph with her manicured nail. Guests become occupants after 14 days. If they're not on the deed or lease, they must be approved by the board. I said, they lost their home, their actual home. This isn't a vacation. She just looked at me and said, "You should have filed a temporary occupancy request." I said, "What the hell even is that?" She reached into a drawer and pulled out a yellow form. Carbon paper, multiple copies, tiny print like it was designed to piss you off just by existing. Then she smiled. And I swear to you, it wasn't a kind smile. It was that fake, tight-lipped smile people use right before they stick a knife in your ribs and call it a misunderstanding. It's all standard procedure, Mr. Ellison. I didn't say what I wanted to say. I thanked her, took the paper, and left before I said something that had really put me on their radar. Too late. When I got home, there was a note taped to our door. Reminder, trash bins must be stored out of sight within 24 hours of collection. We'd just taken them in, like literally 2 hours earlier. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about Derek and Linda. Not anymore. They'd circled us, and they were sharpening their teeth. I thought maybe, just maybe, filling out that stupid yellow form would settle things. I sat down at the kitchen table with a black pen and a headache, squinting at checkboxes that made no sense. Temporary occupancy duration requested. Nature of relationship to homeowner. Intended vehicle usage? Like, what the hell does that even mean? They drive to the grocery store. That's the intended usage. But I filled it out. All of it. Dropped it off in the little HOA drop box by the pool like a good neighbor. Even attached a note explaining everything. Fire, loss, family, temporary stay, no rent, no lease. I was trying to be cooperative, to do it their way. Never heard a damn thing back. Instead, a week later, I got another envelope. This time with a red second notice Santa make a stamp on it like I was being drafted into HOA hell. Inside was a fine, a real, actual fine, $100 for failure to register non-resident occupants in a timely manner. Marie read it, stared at it for a full minute, then poured herself a double shot of bourbon. And she's not a bourbon drinker. She looked at me and said, "They're playing games." And they were, because after that, it was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, we were getting flagged for everything. I came home one afternoon and there was a notice of violation on our garage for storage of non-decorative items in view of public right-of-way. You know what that was? A folding lawn chair I'd left leaning against the wall for literally one afternoon after mowing the grass. The week after that, it was the mailbox. Apparently the paint was fading unevenly. Not chipped, not broken, just uneven. Then the dog. Oh man. They left a note saying we needed to re-register our dog with the HOA because they had no record of his breed on file. I said, "He's a rescue mutt. His breed is called definitely a dog." They didn't laugh. We had never had a single complaint before. Not one. Now it was like they had a Google Doc titled Ways to Harass the Ellisons, and everyone on the board was adding to it in real time. But it wasn't just the paper notices. It got personal. One morning, I'm pulling out of the driveway, and I see this white SUV idling across the street. Woman in the front seat is holding up a phone, clearly filming. At first, I thought maybe it was a realtor or something. Then I saw the HOA bumper sticker. Marie told me later that same SUV had been parked near the corner twice that week, just sitting there. A couple days later, Derek's car, a silver Buick with out-of-state plates, got tagged with one of those neon orange stickers. The kind you usually see on abandoned vehicles. Except it wasn't abandoned. It was parked right in front of our house, legally. Sticker said, "Vehicle must be removed or registered with HOA." That one hit Derek hard. He didn't say anything, but the next morning his car was gone. I thought maybe it had been towed. Turns out he moved it to a strip mall parking lot 2 blocks away and started walking back and forth every day. When I asked him why, he said, "I don't want to get you in trouble." I just stood there, staring at him, trying not to lose my shit. He's a 68-year-old man with bad knees, walking half a mile in the Texas heat to avoid causing problems with a bunch of middle-aged tyrants with too much time and not enough decency. I told him to bring the damn car back. He didn't, said it wasn't worth the headache. And then came the letter that almost made me flip a table. Certified mail, signature required. Inside, a notice that the HOA had formally voted to pursue a lien process against our property for unpaid fines totaling $700 for non-compliance with guest registration, unauthorized vehicle, and failure to correct yard-related violations. I was staring at that paper like it was written in another language, a lien, on my house, because my wife's brother dared to sleep in our guest room for longer than 2 weeks. I tried to keep it together, really did. I've always been the guy who believes you can reason with people, that if you keep calm and speak logically, they'll come around. But this wasn't logic. This wasn't order. This was something else entirely. This was war. I called the HOA number again. Same voicemail. Left another message. Then I emailed the board directly. Got a reply this time. Short and cold. Per the HOA Charter and Fairhaven Preserve bylaws, the board has acted within its authority. No further discussion will be entertained until outstanding balances are paid in full. No further discussion. I read that line over and over. That's when I started noticing the shift in the neighborhood. Not all at once, just little things. The couple across the street, the ones with the garden gnome obsession, stopped waving when I drove by. The guy next door, Joe, who I used to talk football with every week, suddenly started cutting his lawn with AirPods in and barely nodding in my direction. It was like someone had flipped a switch on us. Like we'd been labeled. I wouldn't find out until much later that Cynthia had gone door to door explaining the situation, painting us as freeloaders or rule breakers or dangerous precedent setters. Those were her words. She said if we didn't face consequences, then anyone could just start moving people in, and I guess some people bought it, or maybe they were just scared of being next. Either way, the walls were closing in, and fast. Then came the kicker. I found out they'd contacted our mortgage company. Yeah, they went that far, sent an official notice of noncompliance to our lender, claiming we were violating HOA rules in a way that could affect the value and standing of the property. Just like that. No warning, no phone call. Just straight up tattled like we were some delinquent teenagers skipping curfew. I got a call from the bank's servicing department asking for an explanation. They were polite, but you could hear it in the voice. Suspicion. Like maybe we were subletting or running a halfway house or God knows what. And you know what that kind of thing does? It sticks. It lingers. That kind of red flag doesn't just vanish. That was the moment it stopped being annoying. That was the moment I felt it. Real fear. That sense that something you thought was solid, your home, your neighborhood, your standing, is suddenly wobbly. Breakable. Marie saw it in my face when I hung up that call. She didn't say anything, just handed me a glass of water and sat next to me in silence. I wanted to believe it'd blow over. That if I just kept being patient, kept being reasonable, it would all calm down. But I knew better. They were just getting started. There's this part of you, when things start getting out of control, that keeps whispering, "Someone out there will fix this. You just haven't talked to the right person yet." I clung to that voice for longer than I care to admit. The morning after that bank call, I sat down with a yellow notepad and started writing down every number I could think of. HOA board email, neighborhood association contact, county zoning office, even the state attorney general's office. I didn't even know if they handled this kind of thing, but I was swinging at everything. I figured maybe I've been going about this the wrong way. Maybe I've been too casual, too trusting. Maybe what I needed was to approach this like a real case. Facts, letters, records. Like I was going to court, even if it was just HOA court, which honestly felt more intimidating at that point. So I started logging everything. Dates, notices, photos. I made a folder on my computer called HOA Madness. Every violation, every email, every voicemail. I even recorded one of the calls. A conversation with one of the board members where I calmly tried to explain our situation, and she just kept repeating, "It's not personal, Mr. Ellison, it's policy." That phrase became a punchline in my head. It's not personal. Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law's car is getting flagged like it's a meth lab on wheels, and my neighbors act like we've got raccoons living in the attic. I contacted a local real estate attorney. His name was Kurt. Talked like he had a tennis ball stuck in his throat. I laid it all out for him. The guests, the violations, the fines, the lien threat. His response? "Well, Jack, HOA bylaws are technically enforceable contracts you signed when you bought the house." I said, "I signed something that says I can't let my family stay with me after a disaster." He said, "You signed something that says the board can decide what counts as a violation. That's the problem." Then he gave me a quote, $5,000 retainer plus filing fees. I didn't hire him, not because he was wrong, he probably wasn't, but because we didn't have $5,000 lying around for a fight, we didn't even start. So I tried another route. I emailed the city, got bounced around like a ping pong ball between departments. Zoning said it was private. Code enforcement said they don't touch HOA disputes. Consumer protection said maybe small claims court, but that wouldn't stop the lien. I even drove down to the city hall just to talk to a real human. The woman behind the counter looked exhausted before I even opened my mouth. When I told her what was going on, she gave me this look like, oh, another one. She handed me a flyer with the words Community Mediation Program printed at the top and told me I could request a conflict resolution session with the HOA. I filled out the form, sent it in. The HOA declined, no reason given, just declined to participate. I stood in the kitchen holding that email, blinking at the screen like maybe it'd change if I stared long enough. Marie was behind me tying her shoes for work. She leaned over my shoulder, read the message, then said, "They don't want to resolve anything. They want you to give up." That stuck with me, because that's exactly what it felt like. They didn't want a conversation, they wanted surrender. Even so, I kept trying. I called Ronnie, one of the HOA board members. He was the youngest of the bunch, mid-40s maybe, worked in logistics or something. I'd talked to him once at a block party, figured he might be reasonable. He picked up, sounded surprised to hear from me. I told him I wasn't trying to make enemies, just trying to understand how this got so out of hand. He listened for a while, didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a pause. Then he said, kind of quietly, "Jack, look, I get it. I really do. But Cynthia's firm. When she sets her mind on something, the rest of us sort of go along, you know?" I said, "You don't have to. You're grown men and women, Ronnie. This isn't a cult." He laughed, kind of bitter. You'd be surprised how fast people fall in line when they're afraid they'll be next. That told me everything I needed to know. I tried one more thing. There's this lady named Yvonne down the street. She's lived here longer than any of us. Sweet woman, grows tomatoes the size of cantaloupes, goes to church twice a week. Everybody calls her Miss Yvonne, even the HOA folks. She knocked on our door with a casserole a few days into the madness, some kind of cheesy rice thing with too much garlic, but the gesture meant the world. I told her what was going on. She didn't say much at first, just nodded a lot. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper. It was a newsletter from years ago, had a little photo of her and her husband at some neighborhood event. On the back it said, "Family is always welcome. Guests may stay with homeowners as long as needed with courtesy notification to the board." I looked at it like it was some ancient artifact, proof that things weren't always this crazy. Miss Yvonne said that was before Cynthia took over. She doesn't believe in bending. I asked if she'd be willing to speak up at the next board meeting. She hesitated, smiled sadly. "Baby, I'm old. I don't need enemies on my own street." That was the worst part of all this. Watching decent people go quiet. Not because they didn't care, but because they were scared. Scared of fines, scared of drama, scared of someone like Cynthia going through their trash next. The next HOA meeting was closed door. They posted the agenda online. Review of ongoing violations. Didn't say who, didn't have to. Marie and I sat on the porch that night, watching the sun drop behind the rooftops. Derek was in the backyard, watering the tomato plants like it was the only thing left he could control. Marie said, "You know you can't fix this playing by their rules." I didn't answer, not because I didn't believe her, but because I was starting to believe it too, and that terrified me. Because I'm not the guy who breaks rules. I'm the guy who teaches other people why the rules matter. But what happens when the people making the rules don't follow them? What happens when they twist them just enough to make themselves untouchable? I was still holding on, but my grip was slipping, and for the first time, I didn't know what to do next. It happened while I was making coffee. Sounds ridiculous, right? But that's how most big things in life land, or while you're half asleep waiting for the damned drip machine to stop gurgling. Owen shuffled into the kitchen in his hoodie, earbuds in, rubbing sleep out of his face. He sat at the table, opened his laptop, and muttered, "You ever get HOA stuff mixed up with lease law?" I blinked. "What?" He repeated it like I was the one being weird. "For my econ project, we're doing case studies on real-world local governance. I picked HOAs because, obviously." I just stared at him. This kid had been watching us sink into this mess for weeks, never said much, and now he's casually using it as class material? He sipped his cereal and kept talking. "There's this case from a few years ago, not even in Texas, but same idea. HOA tried to fine a guy for letting his niece stay with him after a hurricane. Turns out the HOA bylaws said rent-paying, lease-bound tenants had to register, but blood relatives staying temporarily didn't count." My brain hiccuped. "Say that again." He looked up. "Blood relatives aren't tenants. If they're not paying rent and there's no lease, then they don't fall under occupancy clauses. They're house guests, not lessees." I walked to the table, real slow. "Where'd you find that?" He turned the screen toward me. "Here, it's a case summary from a real estate law blog, and check this out. Some states have even stricter definitions, like if there's no financial exchange, it can't legally be classified as occupancy for zoning or HOA restriction purposes." My brain was spinning, because I'd heard this phrasing before, not from Owen, but from that yellow violation letter I got weeks ago, the one that started this whole snowball. I ran upstairs and dug through the folder on my desk, the one labeled HOA Firestorm in red Sharpie. It was stuffed with copies of every notice, every letter, every photo I'd printed. I found the original violation letter, unfolded it, and read it again, line by line. There it was, in black and white HOA language. Unauthorized long-term occupancy of non-owner individuals exceeding the 14-day guest limitation per Article 4, Section 2B of the Fairhaven Preserve Homeowners Agreement. I scanned down to the footnote. Occupancy shall be defined as residential presence of persons who are not owners, title holders, or registered leaseholders. Leaseholders, not relatives, not guests. I read it again, slower this time. Then I grabbed the binder Cynthia gave me back at the clubhouse, the one with the carbon copy form and her smug little smile. I flipped through it until I got to the full text of the bylaws. Buried on page 38 was the full definition of occupant, and Owen was dead on. Any person who maintains a residential presence within a dwelling unit in exchange for financial consideration or formal lease agreement, but is not listed on the deed or mortgage, shall be considered a tenant and therefore subject to registration requirements. In exchange for financial. Consideration. Derek and Linda weren't paying a dime. I could have kissed that kid. But it got better. I dug even deeper, pulled up old HOA newsletters from the community website archive. Most were boring as hell. Reminders about fertilizer regulations and pet leash policies. Then I found the one. It was a PDF dated maybe 10 years back. The title read, Clarification on Extended Guests versus Tenants. Inside, plain as day, was this little gem. Fairhaven Preserve recognizes the importance of family and community support during times of need. Extended stays by non-paying relatives shall not be considered lease-based occupancy and are therefore exempt from tenant registration requirements. I read that line 5 times, heart pounding harder each time. Not only were Derek and Linda not in violation, Mitsui, the HOA had formally acknowledged that years ago. I printed it, slapped it on the kitchen table like it was a winning lottery ticket. Marie read it, eyes narrowing. She looked up at me and said, "They knew this," and I knew she was right. Cynthia had to know. Hell, she probably helped write it. That woman didn't sneeze without 3 documents backing it up, which meant this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a setup. They'd been banking on me not knowing the rules, on nobody challenging them, on people folding under pressure like most folks do. But now I had something. Not just a vague argument or a gut feeling. I had their own words, in print, directly contradicting everything they were accusing us of. I called Owen back in. "Hey," I said, "that blog you found, did it link to any state statutes?" He nodded and started typing. "Yeah, hold on, want Texas specifically?" I laughed. "Hell yeah, I want Texas specifically." He found it in under 5 minutes, a clause in the state property code, small-time stuff most people never bother to look at. But clear as day, family members temporarily residing without compensation shall not be considered lessees or tenants in the context of HOA enforcement. It was over, not the war, not yet, but the tides were shifting. I didn't have to fight blind anymore, I had leverage, and Cynthia Reed had a very big problem. The moment I realized I had real ammo, everything about the way I saw this fight shifted. I wasn't just some poor bastard trying to explain himself anymore. I was a guy sitting on a landmine, and Cynthia didn't even know her HOA tap dance was standing right over it. But I didn't move fast, not right away. This time, I wasn't going to swing blind and hope something stuck. No more phone calls, no more pleading voicemails that never got returned. I was done being the nice guy in a rigged game. I spent a couple days just sitting with it all, reading through the bylaws, cross-referencing everything Owen found. I printed out a fresh copy of that old HOA newsletter, the one that literally spelled out that family members weren't tenants, and I stared at that paragraph like it was scripture, because in a neighborhood like mine, rules were their religion. And this? This was their Bible, betraying them. Marie helped me comb through the rest of the documents, too. She wasn't the legal type, but she's sharp and she knows how to spot when something feels off. She caught a tiny note in the newsletter footer that said it had been ratified at the 2013 board meeting. I asked if she remembered anything about that meeting. She said, "I remember Cynthia wasn't even on the board yet." And that's when the plan started forming in my head. Cynthia hadn't inherited this rule. She had rewritten it. Quietly. Slowly. Buried under updates and meeting notes that no one outside of her little circle actually read. Somewhere between 2013 and now, she'd turned a community-friendly bylaw into a weapon, and she thought no one would notice. Until we did. The first piece of the plan was simple. I needed a legal opinion. Not just a conversation, something real, on paper, with teeth. Kurt, the real estate guy, was off the table. Too expensive and way too fond of shrugging. But I remembered someone else. Angela Moss. We went to school together, way back when. She was the kind of person who wore Doc Martens with her suit and could out-argue professors for fun. Last I'd heard, she had started a small practice doing HOA and property disputes, the kind of work no one wanted to do, but everyone eventually needed. I sent her an email. Didn't get into the weeds, just told her I was dealing with a potential HOA overreach situation and had some documents I wanted her to look at. She replied that night. "Bring everything. I love a good neighborhood nightmare." We met for coffee. I handed her the folder, half expecting her to glance at it and give me the same cautious lawyer talk. But she didn't. She read, page by page. Then she whistled low and said, "They're toast." I asked her how sure she was. She just smiled and tapped the old newsletter with her pen. This is what you bury them with. If this was ratified and never rescinded officially, and it wasn't, then every single violation they've sent you is invalid. Every fine, every letter, it's all garbage." Then she pulled out her phone and started typing something into a note. Also, that lien threat? That's shaky ground if they based it on rules they invented after the fact. That could open them up to a claim of malicious intent, especially if they used it to try and intimidate your mortgage lender. That was the moment it clicked for both of us. This wasn't just about rescinding a few fines or making them apologize. This could be bigger, if we played it right. Angela leaned back and said, "We can go nuclear if you want." I said, "Let's start with controlled demolition." The plan came together piece by piece. Angela would draft a formal cease and desist to the HOA citing their own bylaws, the ratified newsletter, and the relevant Texas property code. We'd include a breakdown of every illegal fine they'd levied, with a demand for full cancellation and reimbursement. She also recommended we CC the lender directly, not just to stop the lien threat, but to establish our side of the record. Because if this ever did get dragged into court, we needed to be the ones who looked calm and factual, while they looked sloppy and desperate. Meanwhile, I started collecting backup. I talked to Tyler, the quiet guy, 2 houses down who worked in tech. Told him what was going on, showed him the docs, and asked if he remembered the newsletter. Not only did he remember it, he still had a printed copy. Said his dad used to be on the board and kept every damn newsletter like it was tax paperwork. Then I went back to Ronnie. I didn't go in guns blazing, just laid it out. Told him what we'd found. Asked him straight up, "Do you really want to go down with Cynthia when this blows up?" He hesitated, but not for long. "Look," he said, "I didn't sign off on half of what she's doing. We barely even vote anymore. She writes the agenda, we nod along, it's all just formality now." I said, "Would you be willing to confirm that? Quietly?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "If she keeps pushing this, yeah, I will." That was all I needed. I wasn't going to shove it in Cynthia's face, not yet. But I could already feel the shift. The ground beneath her wasn't solid anymore, and she didn't know it. Yet. Angela filed the formal letter to the HOA board 2 days later. Certified mail, signature required. 1 copy went to Cynthia, 1 went to the HOA's listed legal counsel, 1 went to our mortgage servicer, 1 went to the county registrar, just for good measure. We weren't just throwing a rock, we were leaving a paper trail, and then we waited. I'll be honest, part of me expected a quick retreat, a polite retraction, maybe even an apology wrapped in more of that fake HOA professionalism. What I got instead, let's just say, Cynthia wasn't done swinging, but neither were we, and this time we had teeth. It didn't take long for Cynthia to fire back. She must have figured that the letter we sent was more than just a formality. No surprise, really, since it came with a whiff of legal seriousness. I thought she'd go quiet for a while, maybe retreat into the shadows of her boardroom throne. But instead, she did what Cynthia does best. She hit hard. It was a phone call, of course. She wasn't going to risk leaving a paper trail, not when the heat was on. But the minute I saw her name on my caller ID, I knew what was coming. I didn't even hesitate to answer. "Hello, Dave," she said, all sweetness, like we were long-lost friends. "Cynthia," I replied, not bothering to mask the irritation in my voice. "I just got your little letter. Cute," she said, like she was talking about a puppy. "You think that's going to scare me, or your precious lawyer is going to, what, suddenly make me go away? Sorry, Dave, I'm not the one with something to hide." I kept my tone neutral. "I'm just asking for the rules to be followed, Cynthia. Nothing scary about that." She laughed, and it wasn't the light-hearted sound I'd expected. No, it was more like a person who's been cornered and is trying to pretend they're still in control. "Don't play coy with me, Dave," she said. "You've been making threats since day one. Now you're hiding behind lawyers and your ridiculous technicalities. I'm not backing down. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you're really about. You've got 2 options. You can either back off and let me finish what I started, or I'll make sure your little neighborhood issue is the least of your problems. Let's see how your neighbors feel when they know what you're really up to." I didn't let the words get under my skin. That's what she wanted. She wanted me to flinch, to second-guess myself. But I'd been expecting it. Cynthia had never been one to back off once she thought she had the upper hand. "You're making this personal, Cynthia," I said, keeping it calm. "And you know what? That's your mistake. Because once you start going down that path, there's no going back. We're not doing this for petty revenge or out of spite. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do." She went quiet for a moment, like she wasn't used to anyone not flinching. Then she laughed again, but this time it was different, more sharp. "You really think this is some moral high ground? You think people are going to rally around you, Dave? This isn't a movie. This is real life. I'm the one holding the power here, and you're going to learn that the hard way." "Let's see how long that power lasts when the people see what you've been doing, Cynthia," I said. I was done playing nice. "If you want to escalate this, go ahead, but understand this. There's more at stake now than just a couple of fines and some rules you don't like. You keep pushing, and you'll find yourself dealing with more than just me." I hung up before she could say another word. The thing about Cynthia is that she thrives on control. But the more she pushed, the more obvious it became she didn't have as much control as she thought. She was rattling the cage, and I was just waiting for her to make a mistake. Less than an hour after the call, I got a second letter from her, this one formal. She'd escalated it just like I figured she would. It was a direct threat. She accused me of defaming the HOA and spreading false information, and claimed that if I didn't retract my complaint, she'd take it to the next level. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I knew I had the upper hand now, and I wasn't going to waste this opportunity. I took that letter straight to Angela, and we started building out the next move. Angela wasn't impressed by Cynthia's letter. "Is she trying to get you to blink? Because that's what it looks like. She's trying to make me fold, but she doesn't realize she's walking straight into a trap." I wasn't going to just fight back with paperwork anymore. No, we were going to hit her where it hurt. In the community. We started reaching out to more neighbors. Ronnie had already agreed to stand with us quietly, but now it was time to get the others on board. We went around with a simple message. If Cynthia kept up this attack, it wouldn't just affect me, it was going to affect everyone in the neighborhood. The fines, the threats, the way the rules were being bent to her will, no one was safe from that. If she won this, it'd be an open invitation for her to push around anyone she wanted. Marie and I personally talked to the people we knew. People like Tyler, who might not have cared much about the HOA rules before, but now saw what it really meant. The more we showed them how Cynthia's moves were making their homes less secure, the more they rallied behind us. We didn't need to make this about a fight with Cynthia, just a fight for fairness. And who could argue with that? Then came the bombshell. I found out that Cynthia had recently applied for a rezone to increase property taxes in our area. Basically, she wanted to use her position to hike up costs for everyone, including myself, so she could improve the neighborhood on her terms. Now, that was the kind of thing that could turn the entire community against her. I called Angela immediately. "It's time. We go public." With Angela's legal backing, I drafted a petition, pulling together all the evidence of Cynthia's shady tactics, the illegal fines, the bylaw manipulation, the rezone application, everything. We printed out flyers, posted them on community bulletin boards, and emailed the entire neighborhood. I even set up a website with all the documents so anyone could see for themselves what Cynthia had been doing in the background. I was done letting her think she could play the neighborhood like a puppet. It was time for her to see just how powerful a united front could be. We weren't backing down anymore. I thought Cynthia would be rattled, and she was. But I had no idea how far she'd go to keep the power she thought she had. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure yet how deep her game really went. The day everything broke wide open didn't start any different. Marie left for work early. Owen was in the garage tinkering with whatever robot thing he was building, and I was on the porch drinking coffee and pretending my blood pressure wasn't trying to crack my skull open. I hadn't heard anything from Cynthia in a few days, which honestly made me more nervous than relieved. That woman doesn't go quiet unless she's winding up a bigger punch. But then came the email. Subject line: Fairhaven Preserve Board special meeting. Mandatory attendance requested. Mandatory. That's when I knew we'd hit a nerve. They scheduled the meeting at the clubhouse, called it an emergency board discussion regarding misinformation and threats to community harmony. Translation: Cynthia was about to try and spin this thing hard. I figured she'd stand up there, look concerned, maybe drop some passive-aggressive comments about unrest or divisive behavior, and then try to sweep everything under the rug. That was the plan. Her plan. Ours was different. The clubhouse was packed. Like standing room only packed. I hadn't seen that many neighbors in one place since the 4th of July barbecue back before everything went sideways. People I hadn't talked to in weeks, even a couple who'd been avoiding eye contact since the HOA circus started, were suddenly very interested in what was going down. And oh man, you could feel it. That low, buzzing tension. Like everyone in the room knew something big was coming but didn't know what shape it'd take. Cynthia walked in with her usual crew, clipboard in hand, tight smile, fake pearls. She gave a little wave like she was about to auction off a pie at a church fundraiser. "Thank you all for coming," she said into the mic like we were lucky to be there. "I'd like to begin tonight by addressing some recent concerns that have been circulating." Angela interrupted her, didn't even let her get into her scripted monologue, just stood up from her seat in the front row, calm as anything, and said, "Actually, we'd like to address the board first." Cynthia blinked. "Excuse me?" Angela pulled out a folder and handed a copy to each board member. As legal representation for the Ellison family, I've compiled a brief review of documented HOA misconduct, bylaw contradictions, and unauthorized board actions taken under Chairwoman Reed's leadership. The room went quiet. Not polite quiet, ice cold, are we about to see a body quiet. Cynthia tried to laugh it off. "This meeting isn't a courtroom, Ms. Moss." Angela didn't flinch. "No, but the county registrar's office might feel differently, especially when they see the lien threats and violation notices your board issued under false pretenses." Someone in the back muttered, "Wait, what?" And then it happened. The dominoes started to fall. Angela laid it out, one piece at a time. She read the original HOA newsletter from 2013, the one that clearly stated family members staying temporarily were not subject to tenant registration rules. She held up the ratified bylaw language. She referenced the Texas Property Code, and then, as the final nail, she displayed a projection on the clubhouse wall, the HOA's own digital archive, where that original policy had been silently removed from public view sometime in the last few years. No board vote, no public announcement, just gone. Somehow, she said, this policy was erased without proper procedure, which raises legal and ethical questions we're prepared to take up with the Attorney General's office if necessary. Cynthia's face was frozen. Her little team of clipboard acolytes looked like kids caught cheating on a test. Ronnie stared down at the table, probably wishing he'd backed us sooner. Angela kept going. She presented witness statements, including a notarized letter from Miss Yvonne, who confirmed that Cynthia had told her directly, in person, that the guest policy was now being selectively enforced. Another neighbor stood up and said Cynthia had warned him about being too lenient with family visits. Then came the financials. We'd gotten hold of a few quarterly reports thanks to a neighbor who had previously served on the board. Angela pointed out discrepancies in how fees were being assessed, violations suddenly skyrocketing in number but not in clarity, funds being used for vague legal consultations that weren't voted on or disclosed. And then, the cherry on top, the rezone request. I walked up and showed everyone the form Cynthia had submitted to the city to push for a zoning modification that would increase HOA control over adjacent lots, effectively allowing them to expand board oversight without a neighborhood vote. People gasped. That wasn't an exaggeration. Grown adults audibly gasped. One woman stood up and said, "Are you telling me she was trying to raise our dues without asking us?" Angela nodded. The plan was to propose a community improvement initiative funded through increased dues and assessment fees. It's right here in her notes to the zoning board. Cynthia finally stood up, face flushed red like someone had pulled a fire alarm inside her skull. "That's enough," she snapped. "This is a hostile ambush. You have no right to disrupt an official HOA meeting with—" Angela cut her off. "We have every right to speak, and frankly, this isn't your meeting anymore. It's ours. This is a community, not a monarchy." People started clapping. A few stood up. Someone shouted, "We want to vote." Cynthia tried to regain control. She tried to tell everyone to sit down, to wait, to follow protocol, but it was over. The crowd wasn't hers anymore. Someone passed around a motion form. They still had blank copies in the clubhouse storage closet. It was like they were waiting for this moment. A neighbor, an older guy named Bill, made a motion to call for an emergency vote of no confidence in the current HOA board leadership. Enough people signed in under quorum. Angela walked them through the process, step by step, like she'd been planning this moment for weeks. And when the final count came in, Cynthia Reed was officially removed from her position, right there, in the clubhouse where she'd held court for years. She didn't say a word, just grabbed her clipboard, her tote bag, and walked out the back door. I swear the room actually got lighter after she left, like someone cracked open a window and let the oxygen back in. Ronnie resigned too, said he should have spoken up sooner. Another board member followed. Within a week, there was a new interim board, with Angela helping oversee the transition and make sure everything got reviewed, especially the past violations and fines that had been issued under Cynthia's rule. All ours were dropped, every last one. The lien threat, gone, the fines, erased, and in their place, a letter of apology, signed by the new board president, who added a handwritten note. "Thank you for standing up when the rest of us were too scared to." I didn't keep the letter for long. Didn't need to. I already had the one thing Cynthia never counted on. My neighborhood back. A few weeks after the vote, I was sitting on the porch again. Same spot, same creaky chair, coffee in hand. Derek was out back talking to the tomato plants like they were old friends, and Marie was inside baking something that smelled like cinnamon and melted stress. It was quiet. Not the kind of quiet where you're waiting for the next letter to show up taped to your door or for some SUV to roll by with a camera out the window. I mean actual quiet. Peaceful. Like the world had finally remembered how to mind its own damn business. Cynthia hadn't been seen since that night at the clubhouse. Word is she moved. Her house still sits there with the blinds drawn tight and a realtor sign tucked behind the azaleas. Not many people talk about her now, and when they do, it's mostly in past tense. Remember when Cynthia tried to rezone the whole damn block? That kind of thing. A punchline, a cautionary tale. The new board's been fine. That's the best word for it, really. They're not trying to make a name for themselves or lord over who's got a weed too tall in the flower bed. They put out normal newsletters again. Boring ones. I actually like how boring they are. I open one, see an announcement about the spring garage sale, and smile like a lunatic because that's how it's supposed to be. We still have rules. Of course we do. This isn't the Wild West. But now they make sense. Now they're enforced with common sense and decency, not power trips and paranoia. Derek and Linda stayed with us for a few more months after everything settled. They ended up buying a small place about 15 minutes away. Nothing fancy, just a cozy little 2-bedroom near a park. Derek still comes by on Saturdays to help me pretend I know what I'm doing with the lawn, and Linda keeps bringing over pies we didn't ask for but always eat anyway. Marie swears she uses a store-bought crust. I say who cares as long as it tastes like home. Owen finished that robotics project of his, turned it into a full-on science fair presentation with charts and everything. Funny thing is, he tied in the whole HOA conflict as part of his analysis. He used it to talk about how systems break down when people in power stop being accountable. His teacher gave him an A and asked if he'd considered going into public policy. I told him that's a fast way to lose his hair and faith in humanity, but if that's where his head's at, I'm proud of him. As for me, I changed, not in some dramatic, life-altering, spiritual awakening kind of way, but I don't look at things the same anymore. I don't assume the people in charge are always right. I don't expect fairness to be automatic, and I don't take silence from others as agreement anymore. Sometimes folks are just scared. Sometimes they need to see someone else stand up first. I think about that a lot when I walk the dog in the evening, how close I came to folding. How easy it would have been to say, screw it, it's not worth the fight. Because that's what they wanted. That's how people like Cynthia win. They make you tired. They make you doubt your own logic. But sometimes the system breaks just enough to let the truth sneak through. And if you're lucky, or stubborn, or just pissed off enough, you can shove the door open before they notice. I still keep the old newsletter that saved us, the one with the policy Cynthia tried to erase. Not out of spite, not even as proof, just as a reminder that good people can win if they don't back down. That sometimes the dumbest fights, like whether your brother-in-law can sleep on your damn couch, turn out to be the ones worth swinging for. Marie came out and sat beside me a few minutes ago, wrapped up in a blanket, coffee mug in both hands. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she smiled and said, "Think we'll ever live somewhere without an HOA?" I looked out over our yard, quiet, lived in, perfectly imperfect, and shrugged. Maybe, but at least now we know how to deal with one if we have to. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we weren't bracing for anything. We were just home.